The creation of the State of Israel was the culmination of various historical, political, and ideological factors. The Zionist movement, which advocated for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in the historical land of Eretz Israel, played a significant role. Theodor Herzl, often considered the father of modern political Zionism, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, articulated the need for a Jewish state in his book, The Jewish State, in 1896. The rise of anti Semitism in Europe, which culminated during the World War II, gave birth to the urgent need for a Jewish homeland where Jews would be free from persecution. Post World War II, League of Nations laid the foundation of a Jewish state. The League of Nations, which eventually took the shape of the United Nations, granted Britain a mandate over Palestine post the Great War. The territory granted to the British included present-day Israel, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip. The mandate was entrusted to the British between 1920 to 1948, post the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. The aim was to prepare the territory for self-rule and facilitate the establishment of a national homeland for the Jewish people. This was outlined by the Balfour Declaration of 1917. Many members of the Jewish diaspora immigrated to West Asia and started purchasing the local lands. The Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazis during World War II resulted in the systematic persecution and murder of approximately 6 million Jews. The memory of the genocide was still fresh in the minds of the Jewish population. This genocide, known as the Shoah in Hebrew, represented a dark chapter in human history, and this motivation was enough to establish the roots of present-day Israel. Military forces, which were both of regular troops and paramilitary organizations like the Haganah. From a historical perspective, the justification for occupying Palestinian territory came from the deep religious and cultural significance of Israel in Judaism. Israel was the biblical homeland promised to the Jews by God. Additionally, the Jewish people have maintained a continuous presence in the region throughout history, despite periods of exile and dispersion. The Arab nations were antagonized by the creation of Israel for several reasons, primarily rooted in historical, religious, and political factors. The displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their lands and homes led to the creation of a Palestinian refugee population that sought refuge in neighboring Arab countries. Arab leaders saw the establishment of Israel as an injustice and a violation of the rights of the Palestinian people. They felt a strong sense of solidarity with the Palestinian cause and saw themselves as defenders of the Palestinians' people's rights. Arab leaders also considered the establishment of Israel as a challenge to Arab nationalism and sovereignty in the region. Israel was viewed as a foreign entity implanted by Western powers, particularly Britain and the United States of America. Israel was seen as a Western tool of power to interfere in the geopolitics of West Asia, an instrument of the West to establish a vassal state to exert its influence in the heart of Arab nations. Hence, the Arab states rallied behind the Palestinians. Another major factor of this animosity was the holy city of Jerusalem, holy to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Jerusalem holds deep religious and cultural significance for Arabs as well. Following Israel's declaration of independence in 1948, neighboring Arab states launched an invasion leading to the First Arab-Israel War. The Arab-Israeli War of 1948, also known as the War of Independence or Nakba, catastrophe, to Palestinians, was a pivotal conflict that occurred immediately following Israel's declaration of independence. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq deployed their military forces to prevent the establishment of the Jewish state. Palestinian irregular militias, including the local Arab volunteers, fought alongside the invading Arab armies. The military forces in Israel mounted an effective defense comprised of pre-state militias like Haganah, Irgun, and Lehi. Multiple battlegrounds were created and skirmishes were fought on various fronts, including the Negev Desert, Galilee, Jerusalem, and the coastal plains. From a military point of view, Israel launched an effective defense through a combination of factors. Israel knew about the potential military escalation post its declaration of independence. They had already started to plan in advance, organizing militias, acquiring weapons, and establishing defensive positions. Despite internal politics, Israel's leadership managed to maintain a unified command, allowing for coordinated military operations. Israel had several advantages, including better organization, training, and coordination. Many members of the Israeli Defense Forces had prior military training and valuable combat experience. While Israel did not receive direct military assistance from major powers like the USA and UK, it is alleged that Western powers did support the war efforts through clandestine operations and arms shipment during the war, which gave Israel access to sophisticated military equipment, intelligence, firepower, and direction. Key military tactics and techniques included the use of mobile warfare, defense in depth, superior coordination and communications, flexibility, and adaptability. Fast-moving units outmaneuvered and surprised the Arab forces. IDF established a network of fortified positions and strongholds, allowing them to absorb and repel Arab attacks while maintaining the defensive lines. Israeli forces maintained communication and coordination effectively between units, allowing for a rapid response and reinforcement. Israeli commanders used flexibility and adaptability in their tactics, adjusting to changing battlefield conditions and exploiting enemy weakness. The next major event was the Suez Crisis in 1956. Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, which was primarily built by the French and also the British. Suez Canal is an important trade corridor considered as the shortest link between the East and West due to its unique geographical location. This international navigational channel connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. This action led to the combined forces of Israel, the United Kingdom, and France to invade Egypt. Israeli forces moved across the border and captured the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip, which were later given back to Egypt following United Nations intervention and signing the Sinai-Suez Agreement, or the Protocol of Sèvres. The next Arab-Israeli war was fought in 1967. This war is also known as the Six-Day War. Israel fought the combined forces of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, and with the lessons learned and strategy deployed in the First War in 1948, the Israeli Defense Forces followed the doctrine of preemptive airstrikes, encirclement and isolation, surprise and deception, and coordinated swift and decisive operations between the different branches of the military. The Israeli Air Force maintained air superiority from the outset of the conflict. The Israeli Defense Forces employed a combination of armored thrusts. The mechanized infantry with air support rapidly managed to advance into enemy territories. They were also successful in cutting off reinforcements and supply lines. The Israeli forces isolated both the Egyptian and Jordanian armies, hence, they were able to defend against a numerically superior force. Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories led to the emergence of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, also known as PLO, as the primary representative of the Palestinian people. Yasser Arafat advocated for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state and the rights of refugees. A sense of Palestinian nationalism slowly started to take shape. The United Nations Security Council was advocating for the withdrawal of Israeli forces from occupied territories. In November 1967, the United Nations Security Council adopted Resolution 242, which aimed at the withdrawal of IDF from annexed territories in exchange for peace and recognition by the Arabic states. The resolution emphasized the principle of land for peace as the basis for resolving this conflict. The final conventional form of warfare was witnessed during the Yom Kippur Wars. In 1973, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel during the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. The attack was focused on the Sinai Peninsula, Golan Heights, and occupied territories. There was a combination of factors leading to this attack, including unresolved territorial disputes, Arab frustration with the outcome of the Six-Day War, and a desire to regain lost land. This time, the Israeli Defense Forces mounted a successful counterattack after their defenses were able to absorb the initial invasion. By this time, through experience and training, Israel had perfected the art of defense. The Yom Kippur War ended with a ceasefire agreement brokered by the United Nations on October 25, 1973, with an agreement between Israel, Egypt, and Syria facilitated by the United States. The most significant of these agreements was the Camp David Accord of 1978, which led to the normalization of ties and the return of the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt. The Camp David Accords were in a way seen as the bedrock for further diplomatic agreements like Oslo Accords between Israel and PLO, aiming to establish a framework for resolving the Israel-Palestinian conflict through negotiations. After this war, the nature of conflict shifted to unconventional warfare, which was an indirect confrontation with Arab proxies. Hamas, formerly known as the Islamic Resistance Movement, was founded in 1987 during the first Intifada, or uprising, against Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories. Hamas emerged as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza and the West Bank. The second Intifada, if I'm saying it correctly, between 2000 to 2005 also raised political tensions and became a clarion call for Palestinian independence, characterized by widespread protests, civil disobedience, and violence. Israel was accused of using brute force to quell this movement, which added fuel to Hamas's fire for Palestinian freedom. The Gaza wars dragged for years between Israel and Hamas. This was unconventional urban warfare where thousands of rockets were fired from both sides. Terrorism and tunnel warfare were leveraged extensively. Israeli military operations included airstrikes and ground incursions targeting Hamas infrastructure, launch sites, and leaders. Israeli defense industries developed the capability to manufacture advanced weapons along with support from the West. The Israeli defense industry is known for its innovative technological expertise, specialization, and development of advanced military systems. Israel is a major defense exporter, which has given a major boost to its economy. There is heavy investment in research and development to develop cutting-edge military capabilities. Over the years, they have perfected and specialized in specific areas such as missile defense, the Iron Dome along with the David's Arrow, and I think one more, I forgot. Missile defense is one of it. Unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, cybersecurity, and guided munitions. For a long time, there has not been any major conflict between Israel and the Arab nations. During this time, Iran has emerged as the major adversary of Israel. During the Lebanon War in 1982, Hezbollah emerged as a resistance movement. Hezbollah's guerrilla tactics and attacks against Israeli forces contributed to the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Lebanon. Backed by Iran, Hezbollah gave a strong challenge to the Israeli Defense Forces, who again had to withdraw from South Lebanon between 1985 to 2000. In 2006, during a major conflict, Hezbollah militants crossed into Israel, killed many soldiers, and captured 2 hostages. Despite heavy airstrikes and ground operations, Hezbollah retained much of its military capabilities and political influence in Lebanon. They consider themselves to be the only Arab force to have defeated Israel in war. It is alleged that Iran, through its hold on Hezbollah, is providing support to Hamas in the form of weapons, trainings, and funding. Since we have unraveled the history of Arab-Israel conflict, let's focus on the current scenario. The Al-Aqsa flood carried out by Hamas killed 1,139 casualties and attracted retribution by the Israeli Defense Forces. As of the latest estimates, Operation Iron Swords has taken the life of 33,000 Palestinians, including over 14,000 children and 9,000 women. This conflict has displaced 2.3 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Israel's tightened blockade has cut off food, water, fuel, and medicines. The attack on infrastructure has led to a humanitarian crisis. Many reports indicate the onset of artificial famine in the Gaza Strip. Israel claims to have eliminated 9,000 militants, while suffering 250 casualties on their side. The offensive has moved from North Gaza to the southern region of Rafah, where the Israelis are planning a major offensive against the last stronghold of Hamas. And if I'm not wrong, it has already started. Post the October 7th Hamas attack, public opinion was on Israel's side. The majority of foreign powers supported Israel's right to defend itself, but as the conflict dragged on, sentiments shifted, considering the sheer magnitude of damage unleashed in the Gaza Strip. The situation was so dire that South Africa pressed charges of genocide on Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu is leading an unpopular government. Interestingly, before the conflict, Netanyahu was facing corruption charges. In my opinion, the conflict provides Netanyahu the opportunity to prolong his time in office before he faces the judiciary and fights a 10-year prison sentence. In fact, he also tried to change the constitution, giving more powers to him, which led to protests in Israel. Politically, if Benjamin Netanyahu succeeds in eliminating Hamas, then he stands to gain a political victory which will cement the legacy in Israeli politics and give him a shot towards regaining political capital and public trust. We can also argue that the Al-Aqsa flood operations derailed the peace talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The normalization deal with the de facto head of the Arab world would have laid the foundation for prolonged peace in the region. This deal was being brokered by the United States of America. The recent peace talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia had momentum in the form of the Abraham Accords, signed in 2020 between Israel, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. Both the countries agreed to recognize Israel's sovereignty, enabling the establishment of full diplomatic relations. The agreement was also brokered by the United States under President Trump, this particular agreement. Israel has officially been recognized by Arab countries like Egypt, Jordan, Bahrain, Sudan, UAE, and Morocco. Iran seems to be on the back foot. We are witnessing the resurgence of a multipolar world. The modern Cold War between the United States, the USA plus NATO alliance, against an alliance formed by Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. The Middle East is a vital zone of influence given its vast energy reserves. It would not be wrong to allege that the Hamas October 7th operation could have been an attack of terrorism encouraged to destabilize the peace talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Through this deal with Israel, Saudi Arabia would become a deep strategic partner of the United States, gaining access to tactical weaponry, along with the program for Saudi Arabia to set up its civil nuclear infrastructure, with the nod of the International Atomic Energy Association plus the Nuclear Suppliers Group. It's a historical fact that both Iran and Saudi Arabia are locked in diplomatic and military battle to become the top power in the Middle East. Citing latest public opinion polls in Israel, 70% of Israelis want Benjamin Netanyahu to resign, according to Time magazine. The October 7th attacks were a massive intelligence failure. It is very surprising that how can Mossad not be aware of hundreds of rockets being mobilized along with thousands of Hamas terrorists. According to Reuters, however you say it, even amongst the voters of the Likud party, 69% of Israelis want Mr. Netanyahu to take responsibility for the intelligence failure on October 7th. 56% of Israelis think that Mr. Netanyahu is bringing his political considerations into his conduct of the war, according to Time magazine polls. Public sentiments are against Mr. Netanyahu and the Likud party. The government is built on a flimsy coalition where even 8 members can topple the government. Most importantly, 74% of Israelis opposed a strike on Iran if it hurts security ties with the allies. Iran's response to the airstrike on their embassy has been a show of strength rather than an explicit act of causing damage. The Iranians had given prior warning to the United States about its military strike. This was done through the help of intermediaries, maybe Qatar. Israel needs to consider the fact that Iran spared hundreds of rockets and drones just to make a statement. The Hezbollah is ready for a fight. According to the World Fact Book of the United States Central Intelligence Agency, Hezbollah has upwards of 150,000 missiles in its armory. Many are unguided, but it also has precision-guided missiles, drones, anti-tank, anti-aircraft and anti-ship missiles, and a lot more. Leader Syed Hassan Nasrallah said in a 2021 report that the group has 100,000 fighters. Most intelligence report estimate the number to be between 80,000 to 120,000. The most important fact is that Hezbollah has experience fighting Israel and actually giving it a bloody nose. Israel is at risk of a 3-front war: Hamas in the south, Lebanon in the north in the north with Hezbollah, and a possible front with Iran. The Middle East has become a tinderbox ready to flare up at any moment. Let's look at the geopolitical outcomes, both economically and militarily. 30% of the world's oil comes from West Asia. Saudi Arabia is India's third largest supplier of oil. Up until 2019, Iran used to be the third largest supplier of crude oil to India, but that has changed due to Western sanctions following the Ukraine-Russia conflict. India has diversified its oil imports. Russian oil is estimated to make 43% of India's oil imports right now. India has been criticized about this fact, but India reaffirms that we will give priority to our strategic energy needs. 85% of oil in India has to be imported. We cannot put all of our eggs in one basket. India has set up strategic oil reserves in 3 places: Mangalore, Visakhapatnam, and Pudur. Total reserves are estimated to be 5 million metric tons, enough to sustain the Indian economy for a year without importing a single drop of oil. The instability of oil supply in the Middle East would result in a price war between Russia, Iran, and the Middle East. Russian oil is still flowing all around the world with the use of a shadow fleet to avoid sanctions. This is pointed out by a Bloomberg report. According to a research report by the NGO Center for Research on Clean Energy and Air, monthly revenue from Russian sea crude oil rose by 13% to 28 million euros per day, and the volume of Russian oil exports increased by 9% as of March 2024. Hence, Russian oil industry is growing rapidly despite sanctions. We can expect inflation to rise as oil prices increase. Reality is that a country's economy is still dependent on oil. The price of commodities will increase naturally as the logistic cost of shipping and transportation will increase too. The bottom line is that the world's citizens will have to shell out more money to survive, even during a period of economic slowdown and looming recession, along with job loss due to automation or artificial intelligence in many cases. Since 2020, the world has witnessed 3 consecutive shocks in the form of COVID-19, the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and the Hamas-Israel conflict. The matter will become worse if Iran decides to disrupt oil supplies flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. 30% of world's oil passes through this strait, which is about 20 million barrels a day. Many economies will be inclined more towards oil from Iran and Russia, which will help fund their war chest, thus prolonging global conflict. India is now handling a nightmare situation diplomatically. Historically, we have been non-aligned, perceived as a neutral party, and leader of the non-aligned movement. During our G20 summit presidency, the tactical conduct of our foreign ministry balanced the United States of America and Russia by avoiding naming Russia's role in the war with Ukraine while calling for normalcy. India, in the new multipolar world, can balance geopolitics while looking out for its foreign interests. There is no counter to the fact that in an unstable situation globally, India has to secure its citizens' and countries' interests, shielding them from global turbulence. India's relevance on the global stage can be demonstrated by the fact that even under US pressure not to buy the S-400 missile system from Russia, which would have violated the CAATSA law, India still went ahead with the acquisition anyway. No sanctions on India were announced because of this deal. India even took it a step ahead and started to buy Russian oil at cheaper prices, that too initially in rupees, our own currency. The nature of India's new diplomatic policy is observed when Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar said that Europe's problems are no longer the world's problems. If push comes to a shove, like in the event of renewed border tension with China or dealing with an unstable Pakistan on the brink of loan defaults and economic collapse, India's military has to be at least at DEFCON 3 levels. Indian armed forces should be highly alert. They should be fully ready for combat. Indian armed forces should increase their surveillance, conduct readiness drills, possibly deploy some assets at strategic locations like the Malacca Strait and Park Strait near Maldives. In fact, we have recently activated INS Jatayu for strategic readiness. Even in the present times, the Indian Navy is playing a stellar role in the Red Sea and elsewhere to control piracy and secure our trade supply corridors. As countries start de-risking or decoupling their supply chain and move away from globalization towards protectionism, the reality is that we still live in a deeply multipolar, interconnected world. War is difficult. The most staunch supporters of peace are men and women in the armed forces. But as they say, a butterfly flaps its wings, creating a storm in a distant land. The Third World War will be fought with nuclear weapons, it seems, but I'm sure that the Fourth World War will be fought with sticks and stones as we get blasted back to the Stone Age. I know this video is getting a bit longer, so I will release subsequent videos which will be about mainly this topic. I hope you liked it. If you did, don't shy away from pressing the like, subscribe and share button. This will help the algorithm pick our video up and publish it to many other people. So thank you, fantastic folks. Thank you for giving me your time and attention, and I will be seeing you soon on the other side.